Well, welcome everyone. This is the regional Zoom for ETVA, where we will discuss a proposal of what Allstate could look like in 2027. I'm Brian Russell. I'm co-director of choirs at Stewart's Creek High School in Smyrna, Tennessee. That's in Middle Tennessee. And I'm the Allstate choral chair for TMEA. And so I'm just going to jump right in and get to it. I created a PowerPoint because it helps to keep myself organized. It's 8 slides long, so it's not terrible. And then we'll quickly be able to get rid of that and answer all your questions. So let me share my screen and get that going. We'll start with that just so that we can get all the required information out there and then figure out the questions. All right, I'm assuming you all can see the screen. Nod if you can, just to make sure. All right, excellent. So today's agenda, I do think it's important for us to kind of talk about how we got to this proposal. This has been going on for about close on 3 years now. The committee's work, the questions that the committee was tasked to answer in creating this proposal, actionable steps in terms of what is in the proposal and what isn't, and what we have control over, and finally getting to all of the questions. So talking about the history of how we got here. In 2022, April, at the Choral Caucus, we, the choral educators in Tennessee, voted to add freshmen to Allstate. In that very summer, a committee was appointed by then President Ryan Fisher to kind of talk about what that needs to look at, what that needs to look like. He appointed the 6 regional presidents and vice presidents, Kristen Weirham and Will Breimer from ETVA, Lorna Pica and TJ McLaughlin from MTVA, Adrian Macklin and Rachel Hudgens from WTV MEA, and then 3 appointed choral positions in TMEA, then TMEA choral chair Demetrius Robinson, Susan Kelly, who was TMEA choral performing ensembles chair at the time, and myself, TMEA All-State choral chair. The 9 of us were tasked with looking at, all right, we've decided to add freshmen. How are we going to do that? What are best practices? What are questions that we need to answer in doing that? In the fall of 2022, this is where we were. And remind me, ETVA, if I'm wrong on this, I think ETVA had just started the transition to auditioning freshmen. As my memory serves, used to have freshman honor choirs that were done by director recommendation. And this was around the time that you all started doing auditions for freshmen into their own choir. So that's where we were in fall of 22. MTVA had 2 separate honor choirs just for freshmen that was separate from 10 through 12. And in WTV MEA, freshmen could audition against 7th or 8th graders for their 7, 8, 9 choirs, or they could audition against 10th through 12th graders, but freshmen were not eligible for Allstate. So these were the circumstances under which the committee started examining what best to do for this. TMEA had not yet signed a post-2026 contract for the conference with Opryland or anyone else. And so to the committee, this was all very abstract, and we were kind of given free rein to think about what should be, what could be. And we had no restrictions on space because we were thinking, well, let's plan what we want and then build a space needs and contract around that. In the school year of 22-23, the committee met 7 or 8 times via Zoom and had many more emails than that. In July of 2023, the committee made a recommendation to the TMEA Executive Committee about what to do with freshmen. First and foremost, the committee's recommendation is don't add freshmen yet. We knew that we were in a contract with Opryland through 2026 that was smaller than any of us wanted it to be. The reason that we're in this contract is because, when COVID happened and we had to not have a conference that year, Opryland did not recognize a force majeure clause. And so we were stuck with either renegotiate a smaller contract with Opryland for a few years, or, basically, the TMEA would have had a giant bill to pay. And so there were a few individuals, none of whom are on this call, that really worked hard to make sure that TMEA didn't go under, and we kept the conference there. And the result of that was we had smaller space footprint in Opryland for these years. Knowing that we didn't have additional rooms, and that the rooms we did have were not big enough to make the choirs bigger, The committee's recommendation was, well, let's wait until 2027 in order to add freshmen. Another reason to do that is because, well, time. Knowing where all three regions were in 2023, that we each had different ways of handling freshmen, it was going to take time for us to figure out. Said, once we get to 2027, here's a format that we think best serves the students in Tennessee. And it is the format that we put out there that's now in this proposal. In that same month, July 2023, the TMEA Executive Committee voted to add freshmen immediately. That was against the wishes of that committee. If you want to know why, you can ask the people who were on the Executive Committee back in July 2023. And they did not add additional seats to all states. And so it was, let's add freshmen to the existing number of seats that you currently have. And very little guidance was given to us. In that year, 2020, 23, 24, no regions added freshman eligibility. This year, ETVA and WTVMEA added ninth grade eligibility, and MTVA did not add ninth grade eligibility. Your regional auditions chair people just got the rosters in over the weekend. They've done a great job of making sure that that's happening. I have not gone through and seen how many freshmen are going to All-State this year. From what I've spoken with individuals, anecdotally, it seems like a pretty small amount. Again, this is kind of the first year that we've had ninth grade eligible for All-State. So that's where we are right now. When the committee started working, the first thing we said was, let's use this as an opportunity to examine everything that we're already doing in All-State. We did this from a historical context. I remember a time when All-State Choir was 300 plus students, and the only reason that it's not that now is because War Memorial Auditorium said this is very much a hazard to put this many teenagers stacked on top of each other up here. And so we can't do it with more than 150 kids. And so that's when All-State got smaller. I believe that's also the genesis of adding the All-State SSAA choir. And then ultimately, a few years later, adding the TTBB choir. We wanted to look at it from a logistical context. If we're talking about potentially adding seats to all, we looked at this as an opportunity to look at the auditions and the event as a statement of TMEA's values. I think what we ask our kids to do is a statement of what we think is important. There was a time in TMEA's history, for example, that we didn't have sight reading as a part of the auditions process. At some point, we said, nope, that's important to our values, and we've added sight reading, and things have gotten better as a result of that. I know my data here in Middle Tennessee shows the first year we had abysmal pass rates for the sight reading in the mid-state auditions, and now almost everyone's passing them and doing really well. So that's showing that what we do in these auditions can have an impact on student success and student abilities. So we wanted to look at how is it that we can, in this perfect world that we've been given, how is it that we can format All-State in a way that represents what our values should be? We asked the question, when we add freshmen, do we want to add seats to All-State? And the first thing we did was look at what TMEA did when they added ninth grade to the All-State bands and orchestras. When they did that, they doubled the number of seats and the number of ensembles in the instrumental side of All-State. They used to have one All-State band, they went to two. Used to have one All-State orchestra, they went to two. And so we said, yes, we do think that All-State should get bigger when we add freshmen. Looking forward more into the committee's questions that we were asked to tackle as a part of that year back in 22-23. How much bigger should All-State get? Do we want to double the number of ensembles from 3 to 6? Is there any venue that could handle that? Would regionals be able to handle a similar setup? Do we just want to make the 3 existing choirs bigger? And most of us have been in those ballrooms with the All-State rehearsals. They're pretty packed as it is. It's tough to imagine 25% more students in there or the smell that would come from adding 25% more in the TTBB room also. Do we have a bigger performance space? I mean, currently, I think we use 13 sets of risers for our all-state choirs, and they're pretty full. So what would it look like if we were to make each ensemble bigger? A question we were asking, like when we audition freshmen, do we want freshmen to audition against seventh and eighth graders? As we just saw, that's a model that West uses. It's also a model that ACDA uses for a majority of their honor choirs. It's more developmentally appropriate, especially when we're talking about 14-year-old freshmen a month into high school. Or do we want freshmen to audition against 10th through 12th graders? In doing that, does that incentivize 14-year-olds to sound older in order to gain state level distinction, which all state gives us? Does that create an unfair barrier to ninth grade auditionees by having them audition against 17 and 18-year-olds? So this just kind of gives you an insight into all the different things that the committee considered when coming up with this proposal. Here is what is in the proposal. We are proposing that each region goes to where 9th and 10th graders audition together and 11th and 12th graders audition together. We're not saying it needs to be 2 separate weekends. It does. I think it could very easily be on one. But we think that if we're going to add 9th graders, asking them to audition against a 12th grader could potentially have harmful benefits if we're incentivizing them to sound older than they are. But auditioning against 10th graders is more in line with where they are developmentally. We think that regional events could have much to gain if they were moved to similar ensemble delineations. That is, if each region had the same 4 choirs that all state has. However, right now, not every region has the same 3 levels of all-state choirs that TMEA has. So I think that's less of an important thing. But if TMEA is going to have a, what is in the proposal, a 9-10 choir and 11-12 choir, I think moving to those auditions are pretty important. But regional events and honor choirs could be a host of different things. We'd like to add 1 all-state choir to what we currently have. A 9-10 SATB choir, an 11-12 SATB choir, a 9-12 SSAA choir, and a 9-12 TTBB choir. This maintains the importance that we're putting on treble repertoire and tenor bass repertoire, which I think has served our state really well. It also allows us to make sure that 9th and 10th grade placements alternate between the SATB and gender-based choirs so that we're not saying one is more important than the others, the same way that we're doing now. And 11th and 12th grade would go between the SATB and the SSAA versus TTBB choirs. And then finally, what's in the proposal are considerations in terms of timeline. With a January all-state, that means that we're going to have earlier auditions at the region level, earlier events at the region level. This proposal doesn't say when those have to be. It says that we got to figure it out. It comes to an earlier second tier. And I think moving to an online platform for second tier makes tons of sense given our new timeline. But it's nothing that's set in here either. It's just one of the things we have to figure out. That's a basic breakdown of what's in the proposal. And then here are the actionable steps. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the last slide. Before the caucus, we need to turn the proposal into an actionable, specific motion, something that everyone knows this is what we're voting on. That's what I'm hoping we can get from all the questions and the discussion today is, I like this of the proposal, but this won't work for East. So we have to change it to this. This won't work for West, so let's change it to this. Let's create something that all 3 regions can agree on, but still have discussion, but that we know that people can get behind. And let's turn it into a motion that then I will email to members before March 23rd. On March 23rd, we'd have to have one more round of just one Zoom where everyone from the state can get together and kind of discuss that motion before it goes to vote at the caucus, which will be Thursday evening of the conference, April 10th at 8 p.m. At that caucus, we need to discuss and vote on the motion. If it gets approved, then this summer, we start, if you're a West Wing fan, the Tiger team. Remember the Tiger team from the final season? Most of us didn't make it to the final season. But in the Tiger team, this would be a group of a handful of individuals from each region They're going to be tasked with a lot of different things. For your region, we've got to figure out what are the dates going to be for the following school year for all East auditions, for all East choir, for second tier that works with all three regions. Do we have venues that can work? Are we going to need to change the way we do auditions? Are we going to need to change the number of choirs we have in all East? Those are region-specific discussions that TMEA won't have anything to do with the exception that the date in January will have to adjust for all of us. We'll have to adjust how we do our regional events for all of us. Second tier audition considerations. So we've talked about events and venues, but also audition considerations and how we're going to deal with second tier. We need to coordinate closely all of this with our instrumental colleagues. All East's band and orchestra can't be on the same weekend as All East choir. The window for All East choir auditions, you probably shouldn't have those on the same time that is the biggest Saturday marching band competition in September. Like all of these things have to be considered together in order for this to work. Audition rep and sight reading levels. This is not anything that's dictated by TMEA, but makes sense in my mind that 9th and 10th graders would have different audition rep than 11th and 12th graders. Maybe the sight reading levels are a little bit easier for 9th and 10th graders and a little more challenging for 11th and 12th graders to build that in. None of this is set in stone, but it's all ideas that this Tiger team will figure out. Do we want to move to an online audition for second tier, maybe even for regional auditions? I don't know about you guys, but it pains me every year when you have that one kid that's practiced and is killing it and gets strep throat 2 days before auditions, right? Because all of a sudden that kid's entire year is busted in terms of these honor choirs. Whereas if we had an online platform for regional auditions, not only are we not having to give up a Saturday, but we could give the students a whole week window in order to submit their applications. And that mitigates a lot of those issues that might come into play in terms of sickness. So all those things. And then this Tiger team should also be tasked with more long-term planning beyond the 25-26 and 26-27 school year. Do we want as a state to gradually increase our sight reading standards? To make things a little like decide that in 29-30, we're going to add dotted quarters and eighth notes to our sight reading. In 31-32, we're going to add leaps larger than a fifth. Whatever it is that we want to decide that's going to be, that would be good for our students in the long term if we want to go down that road. So here are the actionable things that do need to happen for sure. And nothing else is actually, set in stone. It's all kind of what we want to make it. So there is the informational portion of this. Let me stop my share and jump right in, everybody. What questions do you have? What concerns do you have? Let's get them out there so we have an idea of what's going on. All right. So you guys will
we're not going to get off that easy. But thank you, Brian, for putting this together. It was really helpful for the recap. I was in those committees, but it was still helpful to be told what we did back then. Because I've slept a lot since then, or very little. Either way, I needed a reminder. Moving forward, we have on this call Mitchell Moore, and we're sort of trying to retool our auditions for ETVA and for All East, ergo All State as well. So some of the things that you mentioned, I don't see as being hugely difficult given the people that were listening in. So I'm excited to move forward. I am nervous. The only thing that ETVA needs to consider is that when this will go into effect, which is the 26-27 school year, correct? Is we will have left, we've been doing All East at Lee University, and we will no longer be there, we'll be at ETSU. At this time, ETSU, I don't think their choral program is aware that All State will be moving to January. So that could throw a wrench in things. But, we're 2 years out. We can figure it out. I don't know if anyone else on the call has any questions or concerns. Is it possible for you to share this recording, Brian?
That was my plan.
Okay,
Just kind of make it, I'm going to put it on a YouTube and send out the link so that everyone can see who weren't able to join in.
fantastic. Um, Mitchell, I see you turned your camera on, and I'm going to call you out since you're chairing that auditions committee. Do you have anything you wanted to add?
I don't really have any concerns. Because it was a very well thought out proposal, and I was able to read through ahead of time, which I really appreciate. I, anecdotally want to throw my support behind the changes just because I'm excited about the potential benefits it could have long term. I think for what the things that we're going to have to do long term are just going to be based off of, okay, what is the state going to decide? And am I correct in thinking that we will know by the end of all state TMEA kind of what direction we're all moving in? Is that correct?
That's how I understand it. We will create a motion that here are the things that are definitely going to happen, and then the things that we can't decide on now, like are we going to move to an online platform for second tier? Those are things that I think we would have to get in place probably by the end of this summer, to be honest with you, so that then each region can go and plan things around that.
Does the second, sorry, Mitchell, I interrupted you.
You're good.
I was going to ask, does the second tier audition have to be codified across the state, or can that still be left up to the regions?
Great question. The way the proposal reads right now is that second tier is going to feel a little different in terms of the students that go there. So the proposal reads that it's not like East is going to get 17 sopranos and altos and 12 tenors and basses, the way I think East got this year. Rather, East and Middle and West will say, all right, the top 24 seeds from your region will be eligible for second tier, but they are not guaranteed a spot in Allstate. Second tier would go online. There would be a week window where students would submit their second tier materials, recordings, and then a panel of judges from across the state would judge and rank the students from across the state. And the top students would then go to Allstate. Now, the danger of that is that East could run the gambit, and 90% of Allstate comes from East, and that's not good for our state either. So I don't have a proposal pulled up. I think there is something in here about the number of students that are guaranteed a spot in Allstate from each region. So there still is guaranteed representation from each region, but it would be the top students from the state, which then makes it into a true Allstate choir. So I think at that point, it would have to be mandated that the state window is this for students to submit their recordings. The state window is this, a 2-week window, let's say, where judges are assigned, Will would be assigned alto ones and Mitchell's assigned alto twos from the other choir. And you have 2 weeks to log into this online platform and judge them. And then the results would then be put out as well. But in that sense, I don't see second tier as being a day you go and sing, in an octet. I don't know about you guys. I think the octet testing is one of the meanest things that we do to our students anyway. And in no other place do we ask them to sing in octets or next to a student who might or might not be as prepared as they are. So I think this will give us a better representation of who should be in Allstate as well.
Brian, I have a question about the number of ninth graders going to Allstate this year. Is there a way that we can get that figure before the March 23rd meeting?
Let me look for it right now. I think I have access to it. Because I literally can log in the Jot form right here. Oh wait, I've got it right here. Ask another question and I can talk and go from there, but let's see here. You know what? There's not right now because in the Jot form we ask for parts and names, but we don't ask for grade. So it will be something I have to go back to the 3 regional auditions chair people and ask for that information. I can tell you, I heard unofficially that West had 12 this year. But again, in West, a good number of their ninth graders auditioned against seventh and eighth graders still. And the only ninth graders that audition against 10th through 12th graders are those that feel like they can do well against 10th through 12th graders. So I think that number would go up when West has all of their ninth graders auditioning on the same, the same audition music, and when they're only auditioning against 10th graders, not also 11th and 12th graders. But yeah, I'll get that information out before
Great.
March 23rd as well.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Cool.
Yes.
Thank you. Again, thanks for everyone's work on this. And Brian, please convey my deepest thanks. I just was thinking through a whole lot and attempted to address so much, and I can only imagine. One question that I had to do with, still at some point in the populating of the all-state choirs, the treble and the TTBB choirs were 9th through 12th grade. So, coming out of whatever the regional versions, however ninth graders would be included. I guess what I was trying to get clearer on was at our regional levels, is it already kind of predetermined then that freshmen would also be included in those would have been traditionally been 10 through 12 ensembles, or would freshman choirs still exist?
I think the only thing, I'll answer it in two ways. I think the only thing that makes sense to me that the state should agree on is that 9th and 10th graders are auditioning together and 11th and 12th graders are auditioning together. Because to me, it's tough to think that this region is auditioning 9th graders against 8th graders and 7th graders, but then they're just going to apply the first, arbitrary number of 9th graders to go to all state.
Right.
This region's auditioning 9th through 12th graders together, and they're kind of doing it in this way. So to me, that's the only thing that I think needs to be standardized. How East then goes about filling whatever honor choirs you have is going to be up to East. As I understand it now, does East have one choir just for freshmen, one freshman honor choir?
One, yeah, SATB.
And then you're all East. It's been a long time. Is it 2 or 3 choirs that you have for all East?
3 10 through 12 ones, mixed treble and tenor bass.
Mixed treble and tenor bass. So you have 4 choirs right now as it stands. I bet your choirs don't meet up on the same weekend, or do they? Do your freshmen meet on the same weekend?
They all do, along with two middle school groups. Yeah.
So in this case, as far as East, it's feasible that it wouldn't add the number of choirs. It would require redistribution of how you place them. But that's up to East in terms as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
The thing out of the proposal that I think will change in the motion is the statement that each region should follow the same allocation of regional honor choirs. I don't think that's feasible for all 3 regions. I think it'd be a lot of strength if we could, but I don't think that that's something that's feasible. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. East can do whatever you want in terms of all East choirs.
It brings up that that thing that many of us talked about before, which is because of the timeline being accelerated as well. Like we already would be auditioning second week of September, and I don't even know my freshmen's names at that point. And so, and we, as you voiced so perfectly, that pressure of trying to audition them against 12th graders, but they wouldn't be at that point. They'd be auditioning for whatever we establish. And then that second tier is where there is that possibility, which then is occurring. Where would we guess? I mean, I don't know, depends on where all these would end up, I guess.
Second tier should be 9th and 10th graders auditioning against each other, and 11th and 12th graders auditioning against each other. Now, in the case of the tenor bass or soprano alto choir, 11th and 12th graders would have the same audition as the same audition rep, and excerpts as the 9-10. But it is spelled out in here how many students per part. So like 16 per part from grades 9-10 would go to the SSA choir, 24 per part from grades 11-12. So there would be a panel of judges listening to 11-12 alto ones for SSAA, and a panel of judges listening to 9-10 alto ones for SSAA. choosing the top 16 and choosing the top 24.
So within that second tier, they are auditioning already for that specific choir, all of them, as opposed to like now how in East, at least, you've made it, you've done all East, and then you get assigned, and then you get assigned that rep, and then you hope to pass that rep. I mean, it would be, I'm guessing, so that 12th grader, for instance, so they've done what they need to do to make all East in their audition that takes place in probably mid-September. They go to the event, and which I guess now probably has to be a bit earlier, and then they find out afterwards, congratulations, you've been not selected for, but because you were in the top X number, then you're eligible to audition for.
I'll tell you what we do in middle is when we give students their results from mid-state, we say that you made mid-state tenor bass choir and you are first alternate for all-state SATB choir. And so we tell them at the conclusion of their regional auditions which regional choir they made and which all-state choir they made.
Okay.
We try to do that in a way quotas. The beauty of this is that by saying you have so many per choir, East can decide how many they send to second tier tenor bass and second tier SATB. But to me, that's something that you would want to do as soon as the results come out, third week of September. The other thing that's going to be a part of this is that currently we don't get our part recordings done until mid-October, early November, because everyone's still in regional honor choirs. I think every director in the state ought to buy a single copy of the all-state rep when it comes out on July 1st, so that, your kids, you're not ordering the music the third week of September when you know who got it, and you don't get it until the end of October, and then they have auditions 2 weeks later for second tier. So like all of that will have to be adjusted as well, but that's also things with time and planning that we can figure out.
Yeah, I think we'll be a little bit, but just because the process is more like with the second tier isn't even a term that we use in East. Like it's just a pass-fail screening, So not that we're behind, but we'll probably have the biggest learning curve about how to adjust to something that, has those kinds of determinations already, coming on the straight to the audition and that kind of a thing.
But at the same time, I think you all were closest to not having to realign your regional honor choirs. Right now, Middle Tennessee has 5 choirs, but 2 of them meet in January and 3 of them meet in November. I think all West is just 1 choir, and it's kind of split into 2 different geographical zones and all that. So like everyone's going to have reallocation to do.
True. We're very proud of that fact. Yeah. Thanks, Brian.
Of course.
And I'm going to go back to cooking, and you can look at a picture of my family while I'm
That's okay. I smell the quesadillas from here.
They're on fire.
So for those of you from all East who are on the call here, do you anticipate that, like, just what's your initial thoughts? I know you're not speaking for ETVA or anything. What's your initial thoughts? Like, do you think ETVA would go to a 4 choir model like what Allstate does? Or like where it's 9-10 SATB, 11-12 SATB, and then 2 9-12 gender choirs? Like what's everyone's initial thoughts on that? Hey Vic, you might want to let me see if I can mute him from here. I muted Vic. There you go.
Sorry about that.
I think that since we're talking about this now, it's going to be good to generate discussion. We've been toying with the idea of adding another freshman choir, like an SSA choir, because we have so many soprano altos in our bylaws or our policy, one of the two. You're guaranteed a representative in the freshman choir, every school who submits one. And so sometimes with the quota, that fills up soprano alto first, and then like whatever boys are there, you have to take them. So the freshman choir has been the hardest one to generate consistent quality with. we've been working hard to rectify that and doing different things and like adding auditions and adding scales and changing how we're rotating the audition pieces. I see moving in this direction to align with Allstate as improving the quality of experience for the freshmen, especially. And I'm kind of excited about the potential for different repertoire that's a little more challenging than what some of the freshmen have been getting in a 9th through 10th choir. I'm interested. I'm not going to speak for the organization, but I do think I'm
Sure.
interested to see the dialogue that's discussed, because we have some we have a lot of ideas.
And I'll say that Middle Tennessee has a freshman mix and a freshman treble choir. And I'll say this, Middle Tennessee will lose the number of freshmen that end up making mid-state. But that's because in order to make the freshman treble choir happen, and we also want it to be of a certain size, we end up filling the mixed choir and then alternating spots for the top, chairs. But then we have 40 per part in a 2-part soprano alto choir in order for it to be 80. Otherwise, like we've had smaller and it just sounded anemic compared to the 120 voice mixed choir. And so I think sometimes there are kids who make freshman honor choir on treble parts that aren't at the level of a lot of students who should be making a regional honor choir. It's great for them because I have kids that make 59th chair every year that it changes their life. And so it's a good thing. And that's going to hurt if Middle Tennessee goes to this format of having 9-10 mixed and 9-10. Am I still there? Okay. 9-10 mixed and 9-10 treble, because I think Middle Tennessee will end up losing a dozen or so per part as a byproduct of that. That's just an aside. James, were you about to say something?
Yeah, so this past cycle, the freshmen were offered a prep clinic through the upper, middle, and lower regions, and I don't think the lower region ended up having their prep because there wasn't enough interest in the prep clinic. So I would think that when we add the freshmen back into the Allstate cycle, we need to do a better job of communicating and make it more of a, maybe not a priority of a requirement, but something that's highly recommended for these freshmen who, some of them are fresh out of middle school and could use this extra help to learning this repertoire. So I don't know. I think middle, you had a pretty good size prep clinic for freshmen. I don't know, Mitchell, were you a part of that?
Oh, middle, like
I'm sorry,
middle.
ETVA, the middle region.
Yes, we put that to area reps to organize the different sections within ETVA, a prep clinic, and the middle area was fairly well attended. I ended up leading it and actually just had a whole lot of fun. So that was the step we made to make the freshman choir a higher quality experience.
Right. I just think that we need to do a better job with communicating, and that's an area rep thing, like you said, Will. So just.
And it was also our first year, and I think we were figuring out a lot of stuff with that.
Mm-hmm.
May I ask, Will, did you all do that on a weekday evening, or was that a Saturday?
It was a Saturday morning.
Okay, that's kind of, ours was offered on a Saturday morning, and with all the other various things, that I think that was part of the problem. I didn't have that Saturday available, so I was just thinking maybe we can look at maybe even asking us what dates work for us. So maybe we could do that clinic on a weeknight. We might get a better response than another weekend added. One comment that I wanted to have, because I do ETSBOA as well. So I did have a 9-10 band student year before last. And then he also made, as a freshman, he made 9-10 band. As a sophomore, he made 9-10 band and then TTBB choir. Because he was going to have to be a 9-10 band and play at pretty much the same level he had played at Allstate as a freshman, he chose to go as a choral student. This year, we're in the same kind of situation. He's just first alternate. Because it's 11-12 band and he knows the level of band will be more, he's opting, if he gets called up, to probably look at band this year. So all that to say, I'm concerned about what will the level of repertoire be for 9-10 as opposed to 11-12. And I think that would be a little bit discouraging to a 10th grader who possibly could have been in a 9 through 12 ensemble doing, some pretty quality rep, and being put in a 9-10 choir where the rep might be a little bit more, I don't know, easier, which is okay. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying I see that already on the band side of things. So is that something, I don't know, something we can consider? I don't know what the answer would be, but it will be, I think, an issue. Maybe maybe they won't even know that there's a difference, but there's a chance they will, I
No,
think.
that's a great point. Let me ask a question from your perspective. I remember a time when students would be disappointed if they got placed in the all-state treble choir versus the all-state mixed choir, because there was an idea that one was better than the other. So I think, to me, that's no longer a pervasive opinion. I think, we've done a good job in all the regions of making sure that it's alternated and there's not one that's better than the other. I think for us, it'll be our job as the people who are hiring the clinicians to let them know, here is what, the level is that this needs to be. I don't think that the 9-10 choir needs to do fewer pieces with Divisi. The only thing that we might want to do with the 9-10 choir is not have them on a high B natural, whereas maybe as 18-year-olds able to do that a little bit more healthy. But other than those types of things, I don't see there being that much of a difference. I could foresee a time where we're like, man, the 9-10 SATB choir absolutely killed this year. I mean, at every All-State, for me, it's always like, oh man, this year the one was the tenor bass choir. Oh man, this year the SATB choir killed it. And a couple years ago it was the SSAA. It's my hope that it'd be the same thing between the two mixed choirs, just one's coming from different. Do you remember those times, like when one was felt like it was better than the others?
I think there's always students always have a preference, right? So but I think you're right. I think we've done a better job. I think even at East, like a couple of years ago, the women's choir, like I was weeping. I thought the SSA choir was so good. So, I think I know they'll be happy to go, no matter where they're chosen. I just wondered if that would be an issue, because even like we were talking about our freshman choir, sometimes they get there and they're not as prepared, and my students sometimes are just a little bit disappointed because they want, a little bit better experience. So I just was wondering if there's a way that we can head that off and say, no, this is going to be, and maybe with those second tier auditions being more than just a screening, that would head that off some too, I think. So.
And Vic, I know you got your hand up. I'll call you right after this. I know that, like, as All-State chair, part of what I do is, I send the clinicians many years of repertoire so they know kind of what to go. And then we go through 3 or 4 iterations of their program before it ends up, actually going out to the students. So I think we could say, especially for the first few years, all right, there's a pretty big level of discrepancy between the 11-12 and the 9-10. I wonder if there's something we can do to make that a little bit more equal, because we're trying to stave this off, especially in the first few years. So I think we have control over what the music that ends up going to the kids' folders. Vic Oaks.
Hey, Tina, I completely agree with you that whole idea about that progression of younger singer to older singer. I think that's the biggest thing within this. Part of the challenge or opportunity, is what I'm choosing to say, is that because this is coming in along with the whole calendar change, it's kind of coming in a weirdly perfect storm, in that, we can blame that for it all. But what it does, though, the opportunity therein, though, is that we're, from what I understand, is that we're actually gaining more space. So that's creating the opportunity for us to do the things ensemble wise that thankfully we're now in the relative driver's seat to to make vocally the most appropriate. And so what that means is just really aligning what that means, because unfortunately the short history is that that hasn't always been well received from the top down. And so I'd love for this proposal to go forward with the absolute, best, fullest agreement. And I'm with you. I do worry how much of that, not ninth grade to 12th grade, but I think we are trying to, looks like we're trying to address it by having it after our regional event. Brian, I'll just say, how heavy has the pressure been to implement middle school? And I ask that because this would then be the time to make it a 7th through 9th choir. And then that would address what Tina brought up, perhaps to some degree, and then the hesitation that I brought up earlier. That's still something that I would just say my short history with it is that when Tennessee ACDA introduced a summer middle school honor choir, some TMEA folks were very unhappy. So much, almost put the finger in my chest, unhappy about the fact that and because they said we were wanting to do that. So I'll just, if anybody has any insight there, because I think several of us on this call, we teach 6 through 12, and it's hard for me to have a conversation about ETVA or TMEA without knowing that half my daily existence are with kids who, are 6 through 8. So just throw that out there.
Let me address it. And then Will, you were on the committee also, so make sure I'm not speaking out of turn here. I can say that that's what I wanted, was a 7th through 9th grade all-state choir. That's the model that AC. That was pretty much a non-starter when members of our committee went through and talked to people in their regions. And the biggest thing was just, we no longer have middle schools, unlike some parts of our country that ACDA serves. Junior highs, where it was the old 7 through 9 model. And there was something that too many people thought that just felt weird in, having 9th graders in the same choir as 7th and 8th graders. And so there was a lot of healthy discussion about aligning it 7 through 9. But the committee ended up falling on the side of, well, if we can't do that, 9, 10, and 11, 12 works. And that was also a model that we got from Georgia for their all-state choirs also. In terms of the middle school all-state choir, I think it's worth noting that we voted to add a middle school all-state choir before COVID, before we ever decided to vote on adding freshmen to all-state. And what I'll say about that is that you're right. 2027 is the perfect time to add a middle school mixed and a middle school treble all-state choir. I think you have to have 2, because we know that we're going to have a lot of boys who are still singing alto that could fit in a treble choir, and guys that are singing alto in September when they audition, and will be ready to sing tenor in January when all-state comes around. Like, all of these are things that 2027 is the perfect time to do it. I can tell you that I don't have the bandwidth to build that from scratch, and I think it's going to take a special group of people who will. Because although what we're talking about doing can be seen pretty seismic to those of us who teach high school, I think the discrepancy of how middle school honor choirs are handled across the state is even greater. And part of this Tiger team, that's in the proposal, is looking at how do we add middle school to this. And so I think there's a vehicle to get that conversation started. Whether or not it happens by 2027, I don't know. But I was given assurances that in 2027, the all-state choir rehearsals will not be separated by just an air wall. There will be no sound bleed in there because our footprint is so much bigger. And that's encouraging to know that they feel comfortable giving that assurance. And so, I hope that answered part of your question anyway. I think it's a great idea to get going on an all-state middle school choir. And we just got to get some folks together, and maybe this Tiger team will be the impetus to get that started.
And I do want to thank you for putting this all in West Wing terms. It really helps my Need
The
to catch
Tiger
that.
team. I mean, the Tiger team.
I said next 10 words like 5 times today for various things. So the next 10.
All right. What's the next 10 words? We'll just do this at the caucus. If it gets passed, we'll do that, you know. I don't know.
I have a question for Will. I have not registered my students yet. Are we still waiting for something from you guys to register all state students?
My apologies. That should have gone. Instructions for how to register your students went out through area reps a week or so ago. If you need that
Okay.
link, I'll send it to you.
Do you mind? Because I must have missed it and I've been watching for it. So, okay.
Yes, I'll send that to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else to address or ask?
I do want to put out, I think it's just going to be like a ETVA specific issue that might not even arise, but as we're talking about potentially restructuring to our honor choir to the statewide all state, is since we've struggled so much with our tenor based voices as ninth graders, how is that going to affect not just that 9-10 choir, but our overarching TTBB choir? Because I feel like at that point we will then have more spaces for tenor bass voices, but maybe not the amount of tenor basses to fill those spaces, and which ensemble might, I don't want to use the term suffer, but I think we're going to have to be really, really careful about how we proceed with that if we're moving towards this structure on the state level and we want to have that here for us at ETVA.
So let me tell you how I think that'll solve itself. Will be again from the Tiger team, but there are 18 per part from 9th and 10th grade that would go into the 9-10 SATB group. There would be 18 per part from 11-12 that would go into the 11-12 SATB group. But then there are significantly more. There are 8 more per part that would from tenor basses that would go into the 9-12 TTBB group, and only 10 that would go into the per part from the 9-10 group. Currently, our All-State Handbook says that if you run out of base 1 alternates for TTBB, go to a base 2 from TTBB. And if you run out of those, go to a base 1 from SATB. And if you run out of those, go to a base 2 from SATB. After that, you're done. We'll fill it with another region. What I could see us doing is building in some redundancies like that into the All-State Handbook, whereby you have to fill those tenor and bass spots in the 9-10 SATB group. Like you have to do that, otherwise we don't have a 9-10 SATB group. But then, you know, if you can't fill those 10 that go into 9-12 TTBB, then your region would be allowed more 11th and 12th graders to go into that 9-12 TTBB. So I don't know how many you accept from your 9th grade tenors right now, but right now we're only talking about the necessity to find 18 from both 9th and 10th grade. And then, you know, hopefully you would have 10 more that would be qualified to go into the 9-12 TTBB. But if you didn't, there would be redundancies in place to fill those spots with qualified students. That's one way that the Tiger team could decide to rewrite the handbook. If there's nothing else, I think as we, you know, go through, let's make sure that all of our directors know about, like when we finally send out that, here's the motion that's going to be presented to us at caucus, that everyone gets a chance to read through that. Let's talk about the importance of this March 23rd Zoom meeting so we can get, you know, dozens and dozens from across the state to sit there and really poke holes in it and decide, is this the way we want to go, or do we want to start all over? I think we're going to have a lot of thoughts about, well, this is changing a lot. It's changing a lot. It's changing a lot. Some of those ships have sailed. Like All-State is in January in 2027. And so with that, we're going to have changes no matter what. Sometimes it feels better just to rip off the Band-Aid and know that we've got more changes, but let's deal with them all right now. I think stopping and saying, well, we just want to add freshmen and not add any more seats. Well, I think there's going to be some students that are not well served by that. And if we can offer an increased number of students an opportunity to go to All-State with the increased number of students that are auditioning or eligible for All-State, that serves students well. And so really just a matter of how do we do that? This is a starting point for how to do that, and then building a process wherein a small group of folks from each region would figure out how the region's going to do that and how the state's going to do that. That's kind of what's on the table right now. So although it's a lot of change, and with that comes trepidation, I think it's change that we, the choral educators in the state, are 100% in control of. And we have the blessing of just enough time to get it done. Not too much, like we're not behind yet, but if we're not moving on this over the summer, I think we will be behind. So that's kind of where we are. We're in an opportunity to build it the way we want and the way we think what's important, under some the timeline that's been given to us, and we can go from there. Any closing thoughts? All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Brian.
You did a
Okay.
great job.
Yes, this was
You
great.
do a great
Thank
thing.
you.
Everybody does great. All right.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it, man.
Bye, guys. See you.